And as we note what comes to us from the U.S. White House, we're also seeing some big changes in voting intentions right here at home. Polls analyst Éric Grenier here to talk about that. He is the man behind the Writ. Éric, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here.
So as I said, some big changes when you look at the latest numbers, big gains for the Liberals. Walk us through what we're seeing from the individual polling firms.
Yeah, we've had a series of polls come out just in the last few days, and they're really numbers we haven't seen for several years. We're looking at gaps of between 4 and 3 points, either with the Liberals ahead or the Conservatives ahead. So when you're looking at numbers like this, where the gap between the two parties is this close, we are effectively in a tied situation. And you can also see in those numbers that the NDP has also come down quite a bit, somewhere between 12 and 16% in the polls. So they have taken the brunt of the Liberals' rise there. But these are numbers that are not Mark Carney numbers, or they're not hypothetical leader numbers. They are actually numbers that either ask respondents, would you vote for Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party or just the Liberal Party? So it is actually that the Liberals have made up a lot of these gains without even having that leadership change yet. I do think a lot of it is Canadians assuming that the Mark Carney will probably be the next leader, and that is helping push the Liberals forward. But the amount of change that we've seen in the polls in just the last month and a half, we're talking about nearly 20-point swing. It is just the kind of thing that you rarely see in an election campaign, let alone outside of a writ period.
Yeah, very unusual what we're seeing here. And to your point, again, just with Justin Trudeau resigning, but you talked about the built-in assumption about Mark Carney winning. And what's interesting to me is when you go through your report on the Writ today, when you put Mark Carney as the leader of the Liberal Party and put that into your poll tracker, walk us through what your findings are.
Yeah, there we see that the Liberals could actually win an election with Mark Carney as the leader right now. There's been a series of polls that have tested Mark Carney as leader of the Liberal Party. It boosts the Liberals significantly, usually, again, to a point where they're tied with the Conservatives, but at the regional level, it has some different numbers. And overall, we'd get somewhere around 169 seats for the Liberals. You would need 172 for a majority government. So they would be in a position to potentially win not only an election, but a majority government. And the Conservatives would make some gains, because we have to point out that these numbers are still better for the Conservatives than they were in the last election. But you saw the NDP down to just 3 seats. One of the things that is just remarkable with the polls that we've seen over the last few weeks is that, yes, the Conservatives have come down, but they're going down to a level that is still higher than they had in either of the last 3 elections. But the NDP, their vote is almost being cut in half, and that could see their caucus be reduced to just a handful of seats, if that. That has been really one of the big shifts, I think, and one of the reasons why when the Liberals have to go back to the House, I'm not sure if it would be a request for the NDP to prop up the Liberals, but maybe a request from the NDP for them to be propped up by the Liberals.
Yeah, well, when you look at that poll tracker, crunching it to maybe 3%, let's take one more look at those numbers, though, because what is jaw-dropping for me is not only the seat count, the probability of seat count that you have there, but the odds of winning most seats, 72% for the Liberals. That is something that we would not have been talking about just 4 weeks ago.
No, it was less than 1% chance that the Liberals would win the most seats. Now, of course, these are hypothetical polls with Mark Carney as the leader. He's not the leader yet, and when he does become leader, we'll see some numbers that will maybe shift around. But it just shows how much has changed, and that when the Liberals are getting into a place where they are tied with the Conservatives, that is enough for them to win an election. As we saw in the last 2 elections, they were behind the Conservatives by about a point and a half in terms of the popular vote. Still won more than 40 seats than the Conservatives. If they end up in a tie or narrowly ahead of the Conservatives, the Liberals can win a majority government without much more support than the other party. This is something that the Conservatives don't have. They probably need to be up 8-9 points to secure a majority government. So the shifts in the polls could have a huge impact on the next election. Is it going to hold? That is, of course, the open question. This kind of movement, when it is so dramatic and upends everything we've seen for the last really year and a half, it makes me think that the foundation for it is not very solid. If it can swing this quickly with Mark Carney as leader, it can swing back just as fast. Yeah,
and in fact, I wonder, because Liberals need Quebec to build government, I wonder about Mark Carney's performance in the French debate of earlier this week, and whether or not that's going to have an impact on those numbers in the polls to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other parties that does take a hit when you put Mark Carney into those polls is the Bloc Québécois. It doesn't really make that much sense when you think about, as you mentioned, Mark Carney's French language skills, but it does seem to be hurting the Bloc. We have seen several polls in Quebec as well that support for sovereignty has gone down over the last little while. It seems likely that this could be related to the threats from Donald Trump, that it is putting that issue aside and making it more about unity, getting behind the flag. What's happening in Quebec is also just remarkable. All of these numbers are just things I don't think we would have expected 6 weeks ago.
Well, luckily we have Éric Grenier to walk us through that. Éric, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks.